Good morning. Welcome to the Chautauqua Science Circle and the Chautauqua Climate Change Initiative joint program. I'm Bob Spiritus. I coordinate these talks. We have Mark Wensler, who is our climate change director. And we hope to have Mike Humphreys here today to talk about, to do his thing with the Webb telescope results. But he unfortunately is ill and couldn't make it, so we're wishing him well. But we were fortunate that we had with us a lifetime Chautauquan, Meghan Collins, who stepped into the breach and agreed to give a presentation today. And she's going to have some assistance, I see. She's got another helpful speaker back here who she offered to sell him today, right, if he interrupts the talk. So, Meghan is an associate research scientist at the Desert Research Institute in Nevada. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Science with a double major in Environmental Sciences and International Development and a master's degree in Environmental Studies from Victoria University in New Zealand. She has many publications and does a lot of the public speaking. She is a member of many associations of the American Meteorological Association, the American Evaluation Association, the Geophysical Union, and the Ecological Society of America. She's also, as I said, a lifetime Chautauquan. She's, during the summer, she comes to Chautauqua and manages and owns the Collingwood at Chautauqua, many of you have heard of. And will talk to us today about how social science can work together to make meteorological forecasts more intelligible. So please welcome, I guess you can't welcome, she's already here and she's a Chautauquan, but anyway, give a hand to Meghan Collins and ask her to make her presentation.
Thanks, Bob. Good morning. I'm so happy to be here. This is a really a topic that's really close to my heart. At the essence of what I'm going to talk about today, it's how a challenging math and physics problem can be solved with story. And in week 5, Mark Wensler and a group of kind of climate storytellers came together and gave a really nice presentation intergenerationally. And the elements of story that you're going to hear today kind of relate back to some of the things that we've heard. And also this week is about awe and wonder, so why not bring a little story into our science? So, like Bob mentioned, I'm going to be talking about how my team of humanities experts and social scientists are working together with meteorologists to make weather forecasts even better. The talk is going to start with a little sneak peek into how weather forecasting works. So when you look at your weather app or when you look at your social media feed and you see forecast graphics, I'm going to show you a little peek behind the curtain into what goes into that and why some of the challenges of getting the forecast right can't be solved with math and physics alone. And then I'm going to share how people from my team are asking users of weather information how we can better communicate forecasts and how we can build trust with people who use weather information. And then the last part of the talk is the most exciting part. I'm going to reveal a series of animated videos that we've been creating as a result of that research and using the elements of story to support forecasters, to support communities to make decisions with this new kind of weather information. And since I'm providing the entertainment for the hour, I'm going to ask for something in return from you all as I share those animated videos, and that is to help give me your first impressions of the videos so I can share them more effectively when they do go out publicly. All of the illustrations that I'm going to share today, all of the animations, are by our student animator, Miriam Mahmoud, so I wanted to give her credit. And I'll share later a little bit about the team of people who are working on this topic. Their names are listed below. So I'd like just to know by a show of hands, how many of you have ever looked outside and then looked at your weather forecast and realized that it was just like a little off, or maybe even more. Yeah, okay, so a lot of us have that experience. And you intimately know kind of the challenges and the implications of that in your life, and you are not alone. Forecasters are intimately aware of these challenges as well. You might kind of think that it's a problem that has to do with the complex math and physics prediction models that go into weather forecasts. And it might be sometimes. But in my perspective, it's also a social science problem. It's how we're communicating as much as what we're communicating. And this is where we see a big opportunity to help make those forecasts better, especially as the meteorological field is advancing. And so that's what we're going to be covering today. Before I talk about that social science, however, I want to kind of, like I mentioned, take a peek behind the curtain and show you how weather forecasts are kind of constructed, and then how the information is curated for what you see. So the forecasts that you are used to seeing most of the time are called point forecasts or deterministic forecasts. They might look something like this, where you see, say, the estimated amount of precipitation that's going to fall over Buffalo or over Boston. We might talk about them in a way that says, they're calling for an inch of snow tomorrow, or the high will be 82 on Tuesday. And they basically represent the most likely outcome of the weather, but they don't represent all possible outcomes of the weather. Because in any prediction, whether you're predicting what cards are going to be dealt or what the weather's going to be, there's actually a range of outcomes and a probability associated with each. So if you think about a snow forecast, you might hear that they're predicting 4 inches of snow to fall, and there might be a 60% chance of 4 inches of snow in Buffalo. But there might also be a much smaller chance, like say 10% or 5% of 8 or more inches. So any prediction actually involves a range of outcomes, because it's impossible to predict exactly what the weather's going to be. So this is where that gap exists between kind of reality, like there's actually multiple possible tomorrows for our weather, and the communication, which is they're calling for an inch of snow, right? So that's where we come in. How can we better improve the communication so that we are empowered to know the full range of possibilities in our weather without completely overwhelming or saturating us with information, right? This is a communication problem. So if we look at an example, this is a forecast for temperature in Northern California. You might look at this first and think, oh, wow, it's going to be really hot in California. Actually, this is a graphic that represents the chance or the probability that temperatures are going to drop below 32 degrees. So for some areas, like in the mountains where you see kind of the eastern part of California, 100% chance. But in the Bay Area, there's a lot of variability. You see 46, 69. If you're a fruit grower in Sacramento or Vacaville, and it's April, and your trees are all in bloom, a hard freeze is going to have a really significant impact on your crop for the year and your livelihood. So you might want to know not just the greatest chance, maybe the greatest chance is that it only drops down to 34, but if there's even a small chance that it's going to drop to 28, you want to know, because your whole year rides on that, on being prepared for that particular forecast. So that's just an illustration of why probabilistic forecasts are really important for different types of weather users. But as you can tell, this adds complexity to weather forecasts. We're not used to looking at a map with probabilities on it. We're used to looking at a map with temperature or with snowfall or with rainfall. So that's why NOAA, the parent organization of the National Weather Service, is turning to social scientists and to experts in the humanities to help with this. So this is my team. We lovingly call ourselves Team Meander, which stands for Meteorology and Environmental Rhetorics. We often, especially in these times, kind of cringe at the word rhetoric because we most often hear about it when it comes to political persuasion, but it's actually I did not know this before I started collaborating with rhetoricians. It's actually a field that studies just how language is used and how language is actually used to form communities and kind of build trust. And a lot of rhetoricians are kind of housed in English departments. So they look at the sciences from a completely different perspective, which brings a really, really fresh approach. So you can see that we have meteorologists, science communication specialists, and rhetoricians on the team. This slide covers some of the technical stuff. I'm going to just take a brief kind of detour into the technical stuff before I get to the fun stuff. The research for this project, as you can see, involves a series of surveys to ask people who use weather information about how we can communicate more effectively. We've asked public audiences, so people like you and I, who rely on weather forecasts every day. We also asked emergency managers, or what we call decision makers, so the people who decide when to deploy the snowplows, or when to cancel schools for the day, or when to shut down roads because it's too snowy, or even the people who have to let water out of that dam because, oh my goodness, there's too much water coming down the river. This is more of an issue in the West than it is in the East. So we surveyed a lot of groups, and we are compiling kind of best practices for communicating probabilistic forecast information. And there are two things that we're collecting specifically from those series of surveys. One are commonplaces or norms. So the things that we most kind of want to see in our weather forecast that might not be numerical or empirical, but they help us navigate our decisions. And the second thing are what we call community risk thresholds or risk tolerances. And those are different than numerical risk thresholds. For example, you might all have a different answer for how hot is too hot to go for a walk. And that might change, that temperature might change if you're thinking about going for a walk with your dog. Or likewise, someone in Buffalo might be more comfortable driving in 2 inches of snow than someone in Atlanta. So we all have kind of our own comfort level thresholds for these go, no-go decisions, and we're collecting those, and you're gonna see how we've used them in these animated videos that we've created as well. So we did a series of surveys to get feedback on weather forecast graphics that use probabilistic forecast information, and we're giving those results to National Weather Service offices. But how do we support those National Weather Forecast Office teams to support communities to make better decisions? Like, what can we provide that can help those forecasters help community members or users to actually use this kind of information? Well, our grant includes resources to create a series of animated videos to help bridge kind of the best practices that we're learning to the real-life decisions that are made with weather information. And the reason that I find this so exciting is that it bridges science and storytelling. Our brains evolved steeped in story. The art of the narrative was crafted far before the scientific method. So our minds are primed to learn things through story. And we learn things through relating to each other. And so this was kind of an ideal way that we could help share the math and the science embedded in these forecasts and make it relatable to everyday life. So I'm going to share a little bit about how we kind of got to the place where we were ready to make the animations, and then we're going to share the animations, and I'm going to hear kind of your feedback and your input on those. So our approach to this series is to create short 2 to 3 animated videos that tell stories. And we're using the old adage, like, show, don't tell. If you've ever taken a writing class, they say, show the audience what's happening, don't tell them. Show them through the action. So we're bringing decision-making to life. Through the character dialogue, we're demonstrating how that probabilistic forecast information can be incorporated into decision-making. And you'll note that we don't use that term, probabilistic forecast information, rarely if at all, because we want people, again, to see how it's used rather than be a talking head and profess about what it is. So the dialogue takes place between a community member and a meteorologist who happens to pop out of his phone to answer the community member's questions. So you can suspend a little bit of disbelief as you're watching these, and it makes it kind of fun. So as I said, I'm going to show you a little bit about what went into the kind of design of the videos. I've acted as producer with our student animator, with two wonderful voice actors, and then our content experts who are the other members of my team. So these are some of the ingredients that you can look for as you're watching. The first is plot points. Every good story has an arc. And in our own kind of nerdy, sciencey way, we included plot points as narratives as well. And you'll see how that all takes place. There's a key probabilistic concept that's featured in each video. And we also incorporated commonplaces and risk thresholds that were derived from those series of surveys that I told you about. And as I mentioned, these are all embedded within relatable decisions that use that kind of forecast information. The plot points, if you kind of want to look under the hood here, every story, the really basic elements of a story are situation, complication, or plot twist, and then resolution. And you see this in plays, you see this in if you watch sitcoms or if you watch movies. Sometimes they evolve into 8 beats of a story, but we kept it really simple because we had 2 to 3 minutes. So we have a hook and an opening, and to kind of connect this to our sciencey stuff, we kind of outline key terms, or we introduce the key terms, use them in context, and then we introduce what we have lovingly begun to call the voice of doubt. And this is the key question or the misconception that the community member has that the meteorologist will answer and kind of lead into our resolution. And then they work together, the two characters work together to incorporate this into a decision and show how it can be helpful. These are the key probabilistic concepts. I hope that this is like the most sciencey feeling slide of the whole thing, because the probabilistic concepts are meant to be distilled into something that feels really intuitive. We use probabilities in our lives every day. Every one of us is an expert in making decisions on the basis of probabilities, but it's really all in how it's kind of communicated and shared that can make us feel either intimidated and overwhelmed or empowered. And we're hoping that these videos can show simply how natural it is to make decisions in these ways. I mentioned commonplaces. These are insights that reflect kind of perceptions about science, uncertainty, and weather forecasting. We chose each voice of doubt question for each video on the basis of these commonplaces that appeared in the surveys. So an example of that might be, but wait, if it's only a 10% chance of this really bad thing happening, like why should I care? Like that's kind of where we often brush off the low chance, high consequence, which is such a challenge in, say, the climate space. Risk thresholds I mentioned before, kind of community risk thresholds are our deal breaker or no-go decisions. You can look for some of these in the videos as well. And then relatable scenarios in decision making. So I'm going to pause here because that was kind of a lot of like drinking from the fire hose jargony stuff. We're going to get to watching the videos now. And like I said, I'm looking for your input. I'm genuinely interested. This is the first time that we've shared these with public audiences. I've got a series of 4 of them to share with you today. The full series will have 5. We're still working on the last one. So we're in kind of the final stages, and this is a perfect moment to kind of get your first impressions and be your sounding board. So maybe you can consider this like the new play workshop of our animations. But instead of like lengthy talkbacks, I'm going to ask you to just come up with one-word answers to 2 questions that I have. The first question is, what was the most memorable thing about the video? I want to know kind of what landed for you. And then the second thing is, is there a word that represents anything that was confusing? Something that like didn't quite land or make sense. And this is going to help me onboard people as we disseminate them more widely, so that they can kind of more easily watch and understand what's going on. So something memorable and something confusing. And after each video, I'll kind of ask for you to popcorn. This will be different than Q&A, so I'm really happy to take questions like at the very end. So the first video covers the basics of probabilistic forecast information and how you can make better informed decisions knowing the full range of weather outcomes that can take place. So this kind of covers the premise of what I've been talking about today. And this is the working title for the first one.
What's this? My weather forecast is different. It shows different predictions for snowfall alongside a % chance for each one. I just want to know what the forecast is.
Hi, I can help explain.
Who are you?
I'm a meteorologist. Don't worry, I'm going to help answer your questions.
Okay.
You are already used to seeing probability in the forecast. For example, there's a 90% chance of snow on Thursday. The forecast you might be used to seeing give a single number or small range. For example, 1 inch of snow. But even with the best technology, nature is not that predictable. And our technology can't observe all the current weather accurately everywhere all at once. Because of that, there's always a range of possible outcomes when we are forecasting weather in the future. New technology now allows us to give you better information by including the chances for different amounts of rain or snow. Here's an example. On Thursday, there's a 60% chance of at least 2 inches of snow and a 20% chance of 4 or more inches. These forecasts include probabilities to give you a view into the range of possible outcomes and the chances of those taking place. Sometimes we refer to them as probabilistic forecasts.
I guess that actually could be pretty helpful. But with all this great new technology, why can't you forecast exactly how much snow we're going to get? This is a lot of extra information.
It's true. The extra information looks a little more complicated than a single number. But it is helpful to make decisions. Since we can't know the exact future of the weather, we will often share information about the different possible outcomes, even those that might have a lower chance of occurring. These are still important to know.
I never thought of that. That makes sense. Here's a forecast that says the most likely low temperature will be 36 degrees, but there's a 20% chance of temperatures dipping below 28 degrees. Does this mean I should cover my garden beds? I've been caught by surprise before, lost my greens and my tomatoes.
How long will it take you to protect your garden from freezing temperatures? Even though there's only a 20% chance of freezing, it might be worth a few minutes to make sure your plants don't freeze.
It will probably only take me a few minutes.
You can make better informed decisions knowing the full range of future weather possibilities, along with the likelihood that each will take place.
Knowing that could be really useful. It's more than deciding to bring my umbrella to work or not. It's about planning ahead for work, travel, and when to take some time outdoors with the family.
Exactly.
That's video one. One word that represents something memorable. Something that stuck. Oops, pause this here. Okay. One word that represents something that stuck to you. Something that you remember about that one. Percent, range. Risk. Cool. Complicated. Great. Chance. Helpful. Unlikely. Great. Probabilistic. Yeah. Yeah, I know, it's a big word, right? That's why we don't use it in there. It's like even hard to say. Chance, yeah, great. Why? Yeah. Worst, yeah. Confusion. Okay, alternatives. Now, one word that represents something that maybe wasn't clear, something that might have confused you? Wind. When is that going to happen? Cool. What else? Variability. Great. Faceless. Why are they faceless? Can you ask me that at the end? Cool. The dog. Why is the dog in there? Ask that at the end too. Accuracy. Okay, good. Like how? Yeah. Are we sure? Yep. The certainty or uncertainty. Good. TMI. Okay, great. What's that? Yeah, upper limit and lower limit. Good. Credibility. Cool. All right. So I'm going to show number 2 now. And this is a video that uses flooding as an example to talk about those high consequence but low probability outcomes.
There's a chance of flooding this weekend in the area, and the National Weather Service has issued a flash flood watch.
Uh-oh. But what is the chance of that kind of flooding happening here?
I can help answer that question.
Ah! You're the meteorologist. Can you help me understand this forecast?
When a lot of precipitation is in the forecast, you might want to know more than just the range of how much rain or snow will fall. You may want to know the likelihood of the worst-case scenario. In this case, extreme rainfall sometimes has a low chance of taking place, but if it does, it can have a high impact.
Yeah. I think I understand.
You might hear meteorologists refer to extreme rainfall events as low probability, high impact, because they have a lower chance of taking place. But it is really important to be aware of potentially damaging outcomes so you can be prepared. Just because there's a low chance doesn't mean that it won't happen.
That makes sense. So I need to start thinking about the different scenarios that could take place.
Exactly. You might see one of them described as the high-end scenario, which means that it has a low probability but may have a high impact. The standard forecast would have said that the chance of rain is 100%. These new forecasts will give beneficial information like the chance of 3 inches of rain or more is 10%. Knowing the probabilities can help your decision making.
But wait, if it's only a 10% chance, why should I care? How does telling me about this low chance severe event actually help me?
Now you know the different possible outcomes and the likelihood of each. It can help you decide if you need to take protective action or inform others who are vulnerable. Probabilistic forecasts provide this so that each person can decide about preventative measures based on their comfort level with the potential impacts and the factors that might make them vulnerable or more prepared.
Now that I think about it, the last time we got 3 inches of rain, my garage and basement flooded.
Exactly. You know what can happen if you get 3 inches of rain. So, with that information, you can decide if it's worth spending the hour to make sure storm drains are clear, clean out the gutters, or even set up sandbags.
Even though it's just a 10% chance, I think it's enough for me to want to prevent that from happening again. It'll only take me an hour to be prepared. I think that it is worth my time.
Great. The bottom line is that you can look for probabilities in the forecast to empower your decisions because you know the full range of possibilities in the forecast.
Okay. That was video 2. Something that stuck to you, something that was memorable in one word. Vulnerability. Great. Cool. Great. Consequences. Preparation. Impact. Precipitation. Safety. Great. Planning. Yeah. Time commitment. Yep. I heard something. Empower. Twice shy, yeah. That's a phrase that encapsulates a lot. How about confusing? Anything that wasn't clear? Chart colors. Okay, great. Important. How soon? Timing, yeah. Multitasking. Okay, great. The dog. Why is there a dog? I'm gonna make you sit on the edge of your seats for an answer to that. Best case. No focus on best case. Ooh, why not focus on best case? Yeah. Yes. Yes. That is a huge, we can talk about that in the Q&A too. That's a huge area of research with the National Weather Service actually. Like, I'll talk about that too. Yeah, if you go to a conference, that's a huge area. What's the difference between a watch and a warning, right? Great. Okay. Anything else before we talk about video 3? Okay. So the working title for video 3 is Grandma Wants to Know If We're Coming. In this video, the community member makes a decision to drive to Grandma's with a snowstorm in the forecast. So we'll get to here.
Okay, kiddo, are you packed and ready to head to Grandma's? It's a long drive over the mountain, so make sure you bring your book. Oh, it looks like the forecast is updated. I'd heard there was a good chance of 2 inches of snow, but now they're also saying that there's a slight chance of 10 inches or more. Hold on, I gotta look into this.
Hi, it's me again. Sounds like you have to make a decision about whether to head over the mountain pass today or not.
Hi, it's the meteorologist. She helps make these forecasts. Now that there's a chance of a lot more snow in the forecast, we have to make a decision about whether it's still worth making our trip to Grandma's. I'm comfortable driving my family if 2 inches of snow is in the forecast, but more than that makes me nervous. I'm not sure if it's really safe.
Luckily, you have some forecast information to help with this decision. This one shows a range of possible outcomes and the likelihood of each, so you can decide based on your own personal thresholds or deal-breaker conditions what you consider safe.
I see that. It's helpful to know that there's a chance of 6 to 8 inches of snow falling, and even a possibility of more than 10 inches. If 6 inches fell, it would be a deal breaker for this trip. I've driven over the mountain when it snowed that much and people were sliding off the road. We got caught in traffic for hours. It was dangerous.
Yes, you know it will snow, but knowing the probabilities of how much is helpful to actually come to a decision.
But I need help sorting through all this information. How do I make the right choice? Grandma wants to know if we're coming.
That's a good question. These forecasts showing the likelihood of different outcomes enable you to make a decision based on your own comfort level. They empower you to make a choice, especially when you know your thresholds or deal breakers for driving your family over the mountain. In this forecast, you can look for the amount of accumulation that would make the trip a no-go for you. You also want to stay informed about the possible scenario in which there's a lower probability of quite a lot of snow.
I see. I would want to know about that.
It really comes down to what your own thresholds are and how prepared you feel. Did you put those snow tires on the car yet? Will the traffic be heavy? How well do you know the route? In this case, the meteorologist can't make the decision for you. But we do provide the information to make the best choice for you and your family.
I get it now. Considering the forecast, this storm might be beyond my comfort level. We're going to wait until next weekend to head to Grandma's.
That makes sense. The biggest thing to remember is that probabilistic forecasts can help with hard decisions like these because they show the full range of possible weather outcomes and their likelihoods.
Awesome. Something memorable. What do you remember about that one? Something that's preparedness, and then the other word? Uncertainty. Good. Danger. Low risk tolerance. Past experience. Yep. Yeah. He didn't go outside, did he? Yeah. It's, ask me that at the end too. Yeah, it's not pie, it's more of a bell curve. Ask me at the end. I know, I gave two analogies, but ask me at the end. Yeah, okay, yeah. Are they accounting for the return trip? Good question. Yeah, important, right, how important is it? Right. Grandma, you can drive to us, right? Emotional impact, cool. Was there anything confusing? Yeah, I know. I wrote this script, and after I was like, this is really gendered. Why is there's not shared decision making here? I know. Yeah, this one. For the snow? Does Grandma have a power wall? Is she prepared? Because Grandma might be up in the mountains and they might lose power. Cool.
Is there a name for the kind of map that you showed?
I don't know that there's one name for it, but do you remember that map of temperature that I showed earlier? A probabilistic forecast shown spatially or shown on a map? We were using a simplified version of that one, of that. So you can do that for temperature, like I showed. You can do it for snow. And on the bar, you saw that there were different like levels of accumulation that associated with different percentages, percent chance. Last one. Yeah, the other factors that might, besides snow accumulation, that might affect your decision. Yeah, great. Cool. Awesome. So let's go to number 4. This scenario might be relatable to any of you if you've had to, say, call off work or time out on the lake because someone heard thunder way over there.
Thunderstorms are in the forecast. I got one of my crew members planning to do a big job with that crane, but I don't want to get halfway through and then have to pull the crane down, or worse, be struck by lightning. How do I find the right information about this?
I can help with that.
Ah, you're back! My meteorologist friend. It says that there's a 50% chance there will be thunderstorms in this part of the city. Is that high?
That is really high. For thunderstorms, That means there's a good chance you'll see a storm somewhere outside your window, but it's very difficult, if not impossible, to predict if it will strike right over your head.
I need more information. We need to make a call on this really soon.
Here's how this works. We use percent chance on thunderstorm forecast maps, so you know where the higher likelihood of thunderstorms will take place. It's a lot more helpful to say there's a 50% chance of downtown, while there's only a 20% chance in the foothills. It's helpful to know the difference between both areas.
I see. But the forecast has been off before. My son's soccer camp was canceled for 3 days in a row, but I never saw any lightning, and it certainly didn't strike the field. My son was disappointed, and we couldn't get our money back. Why should I rely on this kind of information?
Thunderstorms are a pretty unique type of weather event. They're a lot like a boiling pot of water. We know what temperature it will boil, but we can't predict exactly where the bubbles will form in the pot. We know when the environmental conditions are right for thunderstorms, but we can't necessarily predict where lightning will strike.
Oh, I didn't realize that. It puts the danger about lightning into perspective, especially for my crew up in that crane.
Yes. So while we can't pinpoint the exact location of lightning, we can give you a better sense of where the likelihood is higher. Using maps like this to look at thunderstorm risk can help you plan ahead.
With certain things, we sometimes just don't want to take the risk.
Yes. If you do see a high chance, you'll want to have a backup plan ready and be prepared to change plans.
With such a high chance for storms, I'm not going to risk having my workers up in that crane. And I'll probably have to run to pick up my kid. It makes sense now that we don't have exact information about where thunderstorms will strike, but I feel better knowing on the map where the chance is higher and where it's lower.
Great. You never want to be in danger of being struck by lightning. Even though we can't predict exactly where lightning will strike, we can give information about where it is more likely, and that can help you take protective action. And maybe now your crew can catch up on that paperwork, and then you can go see that new movie with your kiddo.
Okay. Thank you. Something that stuck or was impactful about that one. Something that you remember. Chances. Liability, yeah. Yeah, what's riding on this decision, right? Great. Risk, yep. Yep, safety, excellent. The analogy, yeah, the analogy. Map, great. Trust. Yeah, trust, that's a big one for this, right? When big decisions are riding on something? Yeah, risk benefit. Yeah, zones, the spatial aspect. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, great. And yeah, the past doesn't predict the future. We can't always use our experience to interpolate what's going to happen. What about confusing? Chart colors. Where was the dog in this one? I know, they had a policy on that work site. No dogs allowed. How boring. I think it's the only, mention of the word science. Yeah. Okay. Well, this was really fun for me. I hope it was fun for you. Thank you. I want to, again, thank all my colleagues because this was very much a team effort, and especially Miriam Mahmoud, who is she just graduated with her BA in graphic design. She's been working on this for about a year with us, and she was recently hired as the animations instructor to fill in for somebody who's going to be on sabbatical. So I'm really proud of her. She's awesome. I think she did a great job. And then again, the voice actors and our content experts. So thank you all for being here and for your input. This is really helpful. And I'm happy to take questions now. Yeah.
So please come back here to the mic if you have a question. Please walk back here and stand at the mic so that we can record your questions, because we record all our presentations and they go on our website.
I have one comment and one question.
Sure.
It feels like the language requires education.
Okay.
And it felt like maybe instead of probability, it could be that we have, like, it seems that you're assuming
Yeah.
a lot of education. So I
Thank you.
struck by that. And the question is, how can you do this in real time?
How can you do
Show a video in real time when the weather forecast is changing? Like,
Great question. So I'm going to answer this kind of about our strategy for how we'll get these out there. Weather forecasters put forecast graphics out through social media. So if you're on Facebook or Twitter or X, you might see little forecast graphics that are made by the Weather Service. These are intended to be used in different cases where the forecaster might want to complement the forecast with a little bit of education. So maybe they're putting out a snow forecast where it's going to affect mountain areas, and they're going to put that video alongside that forecast graphic. So they can be used in different, or similarly for lightning, say during the summer. So that's how they're intended to go out. So you might be scrolling on your social media and then see them alongside your weather forecast. Great question.
I have a question also about some of the wording in education.
Yeah.
I thought this might be, from what you said, to educate the meteorologists, which seems like, I hope they have more education than that. And the word threshold, I'm not sure, depending on who you're trying to reach.
Okay. Great.
Is it going to educate the meteorologists?
So our project, I mentioned that before, this is funded by NOAA. And our project does have, I didn't talk about it today, but we have a whole suite of materials that are actually going to be used to share what we've learned with the meteorologists themselves. And then these videos are also going to be provided to the meteorologists to support community decision making, so they can take these videos and then share them with community members. So this is meant for the meteorologists to disseminate to people. Good question.
I can appreciate the difficulty of making accurate forecasts with thunderstorms, but can you explain why on a red cell on a radar map showing over the area where you only get a couple drops of water?
So this is thunderstorms. Remember how we use the boiling pot of water analogy? So weather forecasting involves kind of predicting systems, and there's different kinds of systems that can be predicted, and this is one of the systems that's more on like the chaotic side. So so the analogy that was used was, so thunder and rain are two different things, and I'll talk about them, but things can change really quickly depending on how much wind there is. So basically, the big difference between, say, thunderstorms across a region where you might see a lot of rain across a whole area and a situation where you have just like scattered thunderstorms is the amount of wind, because it breaks up those, what meteorologists call cells. And then even harder to predict is where the lightning might actually strike, and that was the boiling pot of water analogy. You've all seen a boiling pot of water. There's heat being applied, there's convection happening in that water, but where the bubbles are going to form, where the water turns to steam and where they float up, impossible to predict, right? Because it's just a series of all these little microphysical processes. So the short answer to your question is, how much wind is happening that day will determine how much those thunder showers are going to break up. And I'm not a meteorologist, so I'm giving you kind of my like science generalist answer.
Okay, just a reminder to Zoomers, you can put questions in the chat. And my question is building on the earlier comment about gender, but I would also add racial, ethnic, both of the recipient and meteorologist. This all looks like white person talking to white person, and I think that could be off-putting to many.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked about that. We, the color here might not be perfectly representative. The meteorologist is a person of color, and the voice actor is also a person of color. And where we brought in other characters, we made an attempt to diversify. So you saw those situations where someone was playing chess in the park or where there were children waiting for the bus. The question about the decision in the hallway that it was kind of just the community member, we had one voice actor, and this was a complete oversight by me, we had one voice actor, and it looks like, because we didn't have the wife, he didn't like consult with the wife, it kind of like totally just went over her head. And once we had everything designed, I was like, oh, that looks really, that was an oversight on my part. So make decisions together with your family. That's the bottom line. Great questions.
This is a higher level question about communication of weather forecasts to the public.
Yeah.
There seems to be the assumption that let's find the best way to do it, let's educate the public to receive it, and over a few years they'll get really comfortable with it and know how to use it. But perhaps we should segment I'm asking if anyone is researching whether segmenting it, perhaps if you knew this is a person that works outside, this is a person that takes more than one long-distance self-driving trip per year. This is a person that looks at a lot of sports data online or investment data. If we knew that, given the coming capability to do generative AI of just-in-time graphics. So I'm just asking, who's thinking about that question?
Okay, great. I'm going to just touch on the first part of your question, then I'll answer that second part. So you mentioned that it kind of sometimes seems like there's an assumption that if we just provide more information or more education, that eventually everyone will catch up, right? And that, in the world of science communication, that's called the information deficit model, which assumes that if we just provide more information or more education, people will make better decisions. But we know that decisions are made on the basis of more than just information, on people's values, on people's risk tolerances, on people's kind of beliefs. And so the approach that we are taking to listen to people and then embed, I didn't go into this, but those commonplaces and risk thresholds that we are collecting, we're encouraging forecasters to embed those in their forecast to use the language that communities use in the forecast themselves. So that's how this approach kind of differs from maybe the standard or the old approach. Now, when it comes to segmenting, we know that there are a huge range of weather users. I mentioned a few at the beginning, right? People who deploy the snowplows are very different than the people who are driving their kids to school. They're both important decisions. Or like you mentioned, taking that long drive. That is a challenge, that is very much a challenge that the Weather Service faces because they're designed to be a one-stop shop to provide all of us with forecast information. We all need forecast information, but we all use it in so many different ways. And so they're very aware of kind of the different touch points and are trying to meet that need. But where they don't meet that need, there are actually a number of private companies that are working on kind of precision forecasting. So whether it's for agricultural producers or, if it's, I live in Nevada, if it's high stakes gaming, like there are a number of different applications. And so there are private sector applications that are kind of trying to fill that. I'm gonna call it a niche rather than a gap, but maybe it's both.
It's clear that it's hard enough to predict tomorrow morning or a week from now, but let's assume I want to retire 2 years from now and move someplace else. How can you all help forecast what the weather might be like in Colorado in 5 years, or in Sarasota, Florida in a year?
Yeah, that is a big job that our mesoscale meteorologists and our climatologists have, given the changing climate. I work with a number of people who, they're part of the Western Regional Climate Center, that basically houses all of the climate data that powers National Weather Service predictions. And one of their tasks is to even make seasonal forecasts, like on a 2 to 3 month basis. And it's just not, the technology is just not there. So making predictions beyond kind of what you see about, I think a lot of us who might be in this space are used to seeing a graph that says forecast temperature over 10 years, and you see a trend line, but you also see the kind of confidence intervals for like 10%, 40%, 90%, and that's kind of the best we've got right now. So hard to predict for retirement, say. Great question.
Just wondering if any of your approaches are informed by people who have been looking at risk communication in the health and medical area. Society for Medical Decision Making, there are hundreds of people worldwide looking at that kind of communication.
Yeah.
Also on a personal level. We're not talking about actuarial, we're talking about personal level.
Yeah, great question. My colleague Kat kind of specializes in risk communication, but from the environmental perspective, and it could be really interesting to look at the literature on health. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Hi, I'm also a social scientist, and I realize the difficulty in communicating probabilities. That's hard to understand. So it seems like I'm wondering what the goal is ultimately of doing this, because it's one thing if I cancel my picnic, but it's another thing if there's a really dangerous thing, and you talked about warnings and watches. I live in Buffalo. Last year we had a blizzard. It was forecast, it was like, stay home, if you go out you're gonna die, and people still do. And I'm assuming that's what you're trying to prevent,
yeah.
Right? So how do you do that?
Well, there are so many, from the point of view of any individual research team, I don't know that we could track the net impact of, say, a whole-scale change in the Weather Service language or approach, because there's so many different variables and mediating factors in people's decisions. But nevertheless, we, like our team kind of takes up that mantle, forecasters are taking up that mantle to help empower people to make better decisions despite the challenges that are involved with that. I know that that's kind of a broad answer, but it's basically what you touched on is the central mission, the central kind of strategic plan of the National Weather Service. So really important topic that's probably going to be on our minds like generations to come.
I just recently moved away from Florida, and there's one probabilistic forecast, and that's for hurricanes that people got used to, and where the cone is, and given that, when do I evacuate, and which way do I go? Does the Weather Service have information on how many years it took to get that to sink in, and how effective is it really?
Good question. I actually don't know. I don't know the history of incorporating probabilistic forecast in kind of the hurricane path tracking, but that is a really interesting question. I'm sorry I don't have more information about that, because that could be probably an interesting case study in the effectiveness of the rollout.
So with climate change being our reality, and how are we going to, as social scientists, get people to accept the risks of things like wet bulb, where you could die within 4 hours if you don't listen to what we're saying? How do we get people to actually accept how our climate is going to be?
This is a huge question. When I was in graduate school, there are a lot of kind of behavioral scientists and environmental psychologists looking at questions like this. Like how do we change behavior? How do we go from information provision to decisions? And I don't know that there's one size fits all. I think there's a lot of good work, but we're still obviously in a situation where there's a lot of inertia in the system, both behaviorally and kind of in our governance and economic systems. It's the question of our generation.
Having been in Vegas last week when it was 114 midday every day, watching tremendous tracts of housing being built, apartments being brought up on the expectation that electricity and water will be there. How do you pitch forecasting to potential homeowners, the people who are going to move there, buy there, and on the other hand, how do you talk to the people who are building in anticipation and financing that? They must be opposing interests?
Yeah, they are. I have colleagues who work on Colorado River water forecasting. There's limited amount of water, and the rights are limited and over-allocated, and this continues to be a challenge. Kind of similar to the previous question, it's for those regions, whether we're talking about Phoenix, Las Vegas, or any of our kind of shorelines. Someone mentioned hurricanes in Florida. These aspects of these sectors of our society aren't working hand in hand. And I think Vegas is a great case study of that.
What about the dog? Did I miss it?
Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you for reminding us. So there are a few reasons. I mentioned, do we have 30 seconds? Okay, I'll wrap up. I'm getting the shepherd's hook. Relatability, a lot of us have dogs. We know that in cases where there's like an evacuation for a fire, they often stay in their homes because they can't leave with their dogs or their horses. We have a strong emotional attachment to our pets. So we wanted people to consider both the impact of what we were talking about, not only on them, but the people and the beings that they loved, and that's why we included pets. So.
Thank you so much. I'm Bob Hopper. I'm your weekly NAG, and I'm the president of the Science Group. How many of you would like us to have a bigger screen? Well, the one way we can get a bigger screen is if you put some money in the basket on the way out, because this is a private place and we'd like to help them do that. We also want to keep having good speakers. We'd like having you here talking about it. And one of our goals is that we'll all be able to ask better questions about life and figure out how to use science to help ask those questions and answer them, and to know which questions of life aren't right now going to be answered by science, so that we prioritize what we can do. Thank you for helping us do part of that today, and we'll see you next week.